can look completely different for each NBA team depending on how this season goes. For some, not winning enough and missing the playoffs would be an absolute failure. And for others, winning too much and dropping out of what could be a potential top pick next season would also be reason enough to go ahead and blow up the team. So I decided I'm going to rank all 30 NBA teams from absolutely no pressure to no excuses. Starting with the teams that are playing with house money, you have to mention the New York Knicks. This is an organization that just went 53 years without ever winning a championship. And yeah, obviously the team wants to repeat and everybody would love to see that. But if this was a team to go out there and get bounced in the second round after everything that they have gone through over the last 5+ decades, I don't think that the fans in the organization would be too upset. Mind you, they had an opportunity to really double down on the pressure on themselves, to go and get Giannis, to go and get LeBron, both guys who wanted to be there in New York, and they decided not to run it back with this same core because they don't feel any of that sort of pressure that they would have had they lost. And on the completely flip side of that, we have the Sacramento Kings, a team that just went 22-60 and decided that they're going to go all in on tanking. They lost DeMar DeRozan. They lost Russell Westbrook. They're completely leaning forward into getting younger and focusing on their future, and I believe that that's the right move. They're not going to make the playoffs. They don't expect to make the playoffs. They expect to go out there, develop some young guys, and suck. At least the Kings did something to build themselves up for the future, unlike the Pelicans, who basically spent this entire offseason just frozen in fear, not knowing what next move to make, because it seems as every move they've made since acquiring Zion back in 2019 has just been the wrong one. I mean, they have one playoff appearance in the last 8 years, and I can't really make up my mind on if this is a team that's not feeling pressure because they're trying to suck and get new players next year, or if they're just not feeling pressure because we've all just given up on this organization together. And what the Pelicans need to do is take notes on how the Utah Jazz have been able to rebuild. And honestly, the only reason I have the Jazz over the Pelicans when it comes to the amount of pressure on them is because that they are approaching their longest playoff drought since before they made the playoffs the first time back in 1984. However, with young guys like Darian Peterson and Ace Bailey still developing, not to mention Lauri Markkanen, I think that this is a team that, yes, they're feeling slightly more pressure than the guys before just because of the organization history. They also have a brighter outlook than pretty much everybody we've already talked about outside of the defending champs. And if the Utah Jazz are outside with their bright outlook, then the Milwaukee Bucks are in a small one-bedroom apartment with blackout curtains up. And this might come as a surprise because you're probably thinking, well, they just had the end of an era. They lost their superstar Giannis. But the reason they're ahead of the Jazz is because of the pressure they're putting on themselves. We all saw the leaked Tyler Hero DM, things he said about Bam Adebayo, the fact that he feels he's a superstar. So now the Bucks are dealing with the fact that you don't really have the talent around Tyler Hero to prove it, but he's putting that pressure on himself. He feels he's that way. So now we all, as fans, want to see him live up to what he said he can be. And what's weird is how the Bucks almost mirror to the Memphis Grizzlies. Both of them had superstars who were unhappy. They moved on for them. However, I feel like Memphis did it smarter. At least when they decided to pivot, instead of ending up with Tyler Hero, they ended up with Cameron Boozer. And yes, I believe that Cameron Boozer, who hasn't played a game in the NBA yet, is going to be more impactful on the Memphis Grizzlies than what Tyler Hero will be for the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that the Grizzlies just performed one of the best resets that we've seen in recent memory. That's why I have them above the Bucks. I think that this team could be good. Maybe not playoff good, but good enough to let you know that in a few years they're coming, which is ironically exactly how I felt about the Charlotte Hornets before they just decided to shock all of us and get rid of LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges. So now we just have all these question marks. Is Naz Reid actually as good as we thought he was, where he can go and lead a team? Is Kobe White going to be able to fill in the playmaking that LaMelo Ball had? I don't know. But whenever you have a team that was on the cusp of making it to the playoffs, seeing how good they were when all their guys were healthy, and you decide that you're going to flip and reset that, I feel like you're kind of under some pressure. Now, if you took everything I just said about the Hornets and flipped it on its head, you would essentially get the Chicago Bulls. They were a team that was nowhere near possibly making the playoffs last year, and then they actually made changes this offseason that essentially made them better. Drafting what potentially could be a steal with the number 4 pick. I think that their season is essentially best summed up by Norman Powell. They're a team that's either going to be really good or they're going to be a team that's really bad. And I could honestly see it going both ways. It's honestly been a very respectable offseason. The only reason they're ahead of the Hornets is because I think they actually have a higher potential to be good, and that they're a team that wants to be good based off of the offseason acquisitions. And in a similar boat, you have to have the Dallas Mavericks. I think that they had a very promising offseason too, where they made strides, both in the front office, changing around their coaches. But what separates them from the Chicago Bulls is they don't have an unproven rookie. They have a second-year Cooper Flag who people are expecting to take that leap forward. In the second half of last year, he showed flashes of having the capability to be a superstar level player. We just want to see him build off of that. They should get Kyrie Irving back. And while I think that they can be a decent team, they don't necessarily have the pressure they had a couple years ago where it's going to be championship or bust. If they're a team that's just hovering around possible play-in expectations, most would consider that a successful season. Now, while all of the pressure for the Mavericks has been about basketball, for the Los Angeles Clippers, it's almost completely different. They were a 42-40 team last year. They had Kawhi Leonard. They decided that they're going to blow that up. But that trade is actually on hold because they have the NBA investigating them for trying to circumvent the cap. Now, that adds extra pressure because now we don't know what are the penalties going to be for the Clippers this season. Are they going to lose Kawhi Leonard and a potential first-round draft pick due to penalties? Is it even going to be worth it for them to suck? Or are they headed towards purgatory for the next few years? They're kind of stuck in this no man's land that we have no idea what their next move is going to be. And from a fan perspective, that is quite literally the worst spot to be in. But at least the Clippers ended up there because they were trying to be good. The Brooklyn Nets ended up here just because it seems like they're the Brooklyn Nets. It was just a few years ago. They blew up the young, fun team that we saw with D'Angelo Russell to chase rings with superstars like KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, which ultimately ended up failing. And since that failed, they have no direction. We saw them try and team up Cam Thomas with Michael Porter Jr. last year before deciding to cut Cam Thomas, and now they don't even want Michael Porter Jr. anymore. So essentially, they just gave up Cameron Johnson for a 2032 first-round pick. I'm sure they'll probably flip Michael Porter Jr. to a team who wants him, but I just have zero faith that they'll even be able to do that successfully. This is a team that, yeah, they have no pressure to win games because we expect them to be bad, but that front office is going to start facing some pressure from the fans because fans want direction. But those are probably the 10 teams I would consider in the league playing with house money. These next few teams might not be playing with house money, but they're not quite knocking on the door of win now or blow it all up. And a team that perfectly summarized that is the Phoenix Suns. And Devin Booker as a player perfectly fits this mold. Throughout his career, I feel like he's never really had the expectation of being like a next level superstar, but at the same time, we all expect him to be at least somewhat decent. I mean, there are pretty much zero think pieces about the fact that Devin Booker hasn't been to the finals since 2021, despite having super teams. Yet Luka, who's never been on a super team, is getting these things pretty much daily. And everyone's pretty much expecting them to go ahead and sneak their way into the playoffs again. But at some point, this is going to start to grow old for the fans, and they're going to wonder what comes next. When do you hit the reset button if Booker's not going to be your guy? Or when do you finally give him another shot at the title? Because that's exactly what the Atlanta Hawks are doing. Last year, they won 46 games, made it to the playoffs, and honestly looked like they might upset the eventual champs, New York Knicks. Then they go this offseason, add Lou Dort and Aaron Wiggins, essentially giving Jalen Johnson everything he needs to succeed. The message was loud and clear for everybody in that organization and for fans alike. The Hawks are ready to take that next leap and start building towards championship expectations. And that's what I want to see out of them this year. I don't want to see another sliding into the play-in and then sneaking your way into the playoffs. I want to see the Hawks take the jump to fighting for that 5 or 6 seed and being a competitive playoff team. I think they have all the tools to do it. And now it's just time for their superstar to be the superstar we know he can be, which is exactly how I feel about the Pacers as a whole organization. Last year, we gave y'all a little bit of slack because you lost Tyrese Halliburton. And I know it's been 16 months, but I'm excited to see him bounce back. If he can recover even somewhat as close to what Jason Tatum did, I want to see this team be really competitive. The only reason I don't have them higher is because of his injury and the fact that I'm giving them a little bit of grace to bounce back. This is a team that I am much higher on than most people. The last time we saw this team play and the last time we saw Tyrese Halliburton play, they were looking like they were going to upset the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that entire 2025 run was them pretty much upsetting a lot of teams that people didn't think that they could beat. So if the pressure is on Jalen Johnson to be the superstar we know he can be, then the pressure is also more so on the Pacers as an organization to be the team that we know they can be and go back to asserting themselves as one of the more competitive outs in the Eastern Conference. But if the Pacers are all about getting back into shape like a bodybuilder who let himself go, then the Wizards are like that big guy who's going on his first weight loss journey because they are in uncharted waters. This is a team who decided that not only was they going to go all in on grabbing Trae Young and Anthony Davis, who, mind you, Anthony Davis was one of the most sought-after forwards in the Eastern Conference last year, they also added DeAndre Ayton and Chris Middleton while grabbing the number 1 pick, AJ DeBonsa. The rebuild is finally over. The Wizard fans can get excited. Now it's time to see if this team is as good in real life as they are on paper. There is so many question marks when it comes to this team. How is Anthony Davis' health going to hold up? Is DeAndre Ayton going to be happy in a backup role? Are the young guys going to take the leap? Probably the biggest question mark of all, are we right about what AJ DeBonsa could be? This is a team that has pressure, but a lot of their pressure is from excitement about what the future could be. This is the kind of pressure that makes diamonds, and I can see this being a team with tremendous upside, or the Wizards could just head back into complete misery and prove that they're cursed, which is genuinely starting to feel like the case with the Portland Trail Blazers. It seems like every time they have even the slightest amount of success, there's always a setback. The future starts to look bright. Guess what? The coach is being investigated by the FBI. The interim head coach steps up and proves that he can lead this team to the playoffs. Guess what? New ownership wants to cheap out and not pay him what he deserves. Now, granted, they traded for Ja Morant. They brought Dame back home. They have a young all-star, not named Damian Lillard, for the first time in like 15 years. The pressure isn't on the players in this case. The pressure is on ownership and the front office to prove that they know what they're actually doing, because it seemed like they had a direction that they were set on and that they were headed that was looking very promising before they decided, you know what? Let's just take the road less traveled out of complete nowhere. But you know what? Maybe the road less traveled is the way to go, because the Warriors decided that they were going to just stick with the road that they tried one time. Their whole offseason strategy was, hey, do you want to come and play with Steph Curry? It literally worked one time in 2016 when they got Kevin Durant, and I guess they thought it would work again. They've only was linked to large names the entire offseason. LeBron James, Kevin Durant again. And then what they ultimately ended up doing was re-signing Draymond Green to a large contract, losing Steve Kerr, bringing back Steve Kerr, and then deciding, you know what? We're just going to run it back with the team we have and accept the fact that we're not headed for championship. While it's nice on paper to send your superstars out with some love, what does that mean for the fans? What does the future hold? How are you saying on one hand, you're worried about the future of the Golden State Warriors, but you're not actively trying to lose games you know is going to lead you to having a better future for the Golden State Warriors? Curry, when he was healthy last year, was still playing like a top 10 to 15 player, and we can assume that he's probably going to play that well again, but at this old age, can he keep it up for a whole season? Are they going to just be a middle-of-the-pack team and get a lower lottery pick, or are they going to try and tank and actually go in on trying to get a good pick? Are they going to make some trades to see if they can build off of what they had going on before Jimmy Butler got hurt? I genuinely don't know what this team's direction is, and that is a huge problem when you have this many Hall of Famers on one team still. And it's almost like the Orlando Magic saw the Golden State Warriors decision-making paralysis and decided, oh, we don't want to be that. And they got to work this offseason. They saw how short they came up last year. That was a team that had no business being in that 8 seed, and they showcased that in the first round when they did put up a good fight against the Pistons. And I love the fact that they didn't let that playoff series be the justification that they didn't need to make moves. They got to work, made some moves, and retooled, basically giving Paolo Banchero no excuses this season. It's time for him to show that he is the superstar we thought he was in the playoffs a couple years ago. A play-in is not going to cut it. A 7-8 seed isn't going to cut it. Even as strong as the Eastern Conference is, I would say that anything below the 5th seed isn't going to cut it. It's time for them to put together a real competitive season and be a competitive out in the playoffs, and maybe even start pushing for an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. But the Orlando Magic could go ahead and scoot over a little bit because the Thunder are squeezing right in that same boat with them. The only reason they're not higher on this list with a 2-time MVP is because they already won their championship. So that lessens the amount of pressure on you. However, when you start to get rid of key pieces that helped you get that championship, i.e. Lou Dort, that pressure starts to build up a little bit again, because now it's wondering, okay, which direction are we headed? 2025, they're NBA champs. 2026, they lose in the Western Conference Finals. If they lose anywhere short of a competitive second round, things start to look a little spooky for the future for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, I would say that's still more grace than some of the teams to come, but they are starting to get in that territory. Are they going to become a team that's viewed as a dynasty, or are they just a team that's one and done? But hey, at least one and done would be better than none and done. And that could be a real reality for the Houston Rockets, who decided they were going to trade their up-and-coming youth for an aged veteran just because they thought they were ready for win now. They went from a 2 seed all the way down to a 5 seed. And granted, yes, Kevin Durant, one of the best scorers we ever seen. However, when was the last time we saw this man healthy for a late playoff push? They cannot risk having that again. If that happens once again, and Jalen Green keeps developing, and Dylan Brooks keeps developing, now people are going to start looking at that front office like, yo, what were y'all thinking when you decided to bring in Kevin Durant? Not to mention the timeline was already looking kind of junky with Ahmed Thomas and Sengun being so much younger. They really need to see some postseason results, or it's going to be time for a soft reset at the minimum. Now, if those last 10 teams heard the pressure knocking at the door, for these final 10 teams, there is absolutely no excuses. These are 10 teams that they have to live up to the hype, or they will have to blow it up completely. Starting with the Toronto Raptors, you had a very young, dynamic wing duo in Brandon Ingram and Scotty Barnes. You went 46 at 36. One point last season was super hot, and you decide to blow that up to bring back a 35-year-old Kawhi Leonard with everything he has going on. And yes, I know the trade is on hold, but that adds to the pressure, because what do you do in a situation where y'all decide not to let the trade go through? Now you got Brandon Ingram back in the building. How do you mend that relationship? And if you do go through with the trade and they decide that Kawhi Leonard isn't suspended for whatever reason, you now have to be competitive. Going out in the first or second round, that is a failure. We need to see some results. You brought him back for a reason. Scotty Barnes is your cornerstone. It's time for superstars to be superstars and lead this team to the promised land. How can you possibly mention strange trades and not bring up the Boston Celtics? Yes, from a financial aspect, it kind of made sense to move on from Jaylen Brown. But from a basketball standpoint, we just watched JB step up without Jason Tatum and lead this team to the 2nd seed while finishing 6th in MVP voting. And you replace that with the aged Paul George. And yes, the potential for this team to be good is still there. Paul George can still play defense. His jump shot is still there. While he might not athletically, or even at this point in his career, be as skillfully as Jaylen Brown, he can still be productive. And with that, if Boston takes a significant step backward next year, everybody's looking at Jason Tatum and the organization sideways. Did they keep the right person? Was Brown actually better than Tatum this whole time? These are the type of questions that will be asked if this team isn't successful. The bare minimum, you have to reach the same level you reached last year with Jaylen Brown and no Tatum. Could you just imagine the onslaught of hate that the Lakers would have to deal with if they were worse this year than they were last year with LeBron? This is essentially Luka's franchise now. They gave this man the keys, and they did their best to replicate that 2024 team that he took to the finals. And I'm not necessarily saying that this team needs to go finals or bust, but we definitely got to see some steps in the right direction. Last year, Luka was a legitimate MVP conversation who unfortunately had his season derailed by a hamstring injury at the end. But when he went out, LeBron James was able to step up from the 3rd option to the 1st option and lead them to the 2nd round and put up a good fight against the defending champ Oklahoma City Thunder. There's already tension between the LeBron fans and the Laker fans at this point. Some people feeling like LeBron got pushed out from the organization, that there was different reports that LeBron didn't feel truly appreciated by the Lakers ownership and front office, that the team was ready to move on and hand Luka the keys. Now Luka has the keys, and it's time to see how the guy can drive. And while I believe Luka is a phenomenal player who handles pressure so well, this isn't the same type of pressure he faced out there in Dallas. Laker fans are absolutely ruthless, and if this goes sideways, somebody in the front office's job could be on the line. And I know that the Minnesota front office knows what I'm talking about. You can tell in just the moves they made this offseason. They gave up a lot to land Rudy Gobert. And then they also did a lot when they got rid of Cat to bring in Julius Randle. Now, they tried to fix that this offseason, but where they started to lose me a little bit is where they also gave up Naz Reid. So now we got LaMelo Ball, who people wrongly accuse of not being a winning basketball player. They're at the 4 spot and keeping Rudy Gobert as the defensive anchor. I'm excited to see how this plays out, because this is a pairing that I could see being extremely well. This could be one of the best backcourts that we have in the game right now. However, there is some flaws. LaMelo Ball's health is one issue that he did have while he was in Charlotte. He hasn't had the pressure of having to win like he's going to face here in Minnesota. This is a team that in the last 3 years has been to 2 Western Conference Finals. This is a team that's looking to keep pushing past the Western Conference Finals. This is a team that believes that they are a championship caliber team, rightfully so. And the only thing they have left to do is to prove it and get over the hump. And if this team regresses in any which way, it's going to be the front office, once again, that's taking the brunt of that pressure because there's absolutely no way they're moving on from Anthony Edwards. And I could also see them finally deciding, you know what, the Rudy Gobert experiment didn't work and moving on in that direction too. The only thing they have deeply established is who their core guy is going to be going in the future. And this feels like this is his front office's last shot at putting the right team around him, which I hope the Detroit Pistons have been paying attention to because that could be their future if they're not careful with Cade Cunningham. You just went 60-22 and then lost a game 7 in the second round. Now, yes, winning 60 games is a phenomenal regular season. But the worst thing you can become is one of those teams who are really good in the regular season, top 2-3 seed regularly, but always getting bounced in the second round. Because when that starts to happen, players start to get moved. GMs start to get fired. Coaches start to get fired. And that could be in the future right now for the Pistons. Jalen Duren significantly regressed come playoff time. That is an issue that has to be addressed. Whether that's a scheming issue, whether that's just he needed experience, I don't know. But we have to see some level of improvement now, or this team is going to shape up and be different. Because being young is no longer an excuse when you start winning games. Winning games comes with expectations, and you've won enough that now the expectations are real, which means the consequences are also going to be real, which is an issue the Spurs could be getting to know oh so soon. Because everything's hunky-dory. Your third-year superstar is leading you to the NBA Finals in 62 wins. And your rookie's debuting that he has bright potential and maybe even a modern-day Shaq and Kobe pairing up. And then the icing on the cake is that same superstar decide he's going to take a pay cut. Just because he cares that much about winning, that's when the future can start to look a little scary. Could say that the Spurs don't reach another NBA Finals. Say that this season they regress significantly. You know that superstar cares more about winning than anything else. And if you can't regularly put winning around him, that's when superstars start to force their way out of organizations. There's no way you can have the expectation of loyalty whenever you're not meeting what they want in return. You want the guy to stay and keep giving you his talents at a pay cut just for the sake of loyalty? And yeah, maybe Wemby is the guy who's willing to make that sacrifice, but that doesn't mean that the other guys will be or even have to be. This is another young team who, yes, maybe they're winning ahead of schedule, but now the schedule just got moved up, and they need to keep developing wins. Wemby finished top 2 in the MVP voting. He is arguably one of the best players in basketball right now, and that team got exposed in the NBA Finals. Will other teams start to do the same thing to them that the Knicks did? And if they do, how will the Spurs respond? These are all questions that have to be answered. Otherwise, you can end up like the Denver Nuggets. They have Nikola Jokic, best player in the world, won a ring in 2023, but yet haven't been able to get past the second round since. As a matter of fact, they just got knocked out of the first round with Jokic still being Jokic. And now you're dealing with the fact that he has a contract that's due after this season, and he's still playing at an MVP level. If you can't build around that, the Nuggets might have to go ahead and hit a hard reset. Now, I don't necessarily think that means they have to move on from Jokic, but you have to find a way to start building around him, giving him pieces he can actually win with and not just thrive with offensively and put up the most efficient seasons we've seen since Wilt. That's just essentially setting another team up with the recipe on how the Miami Heat landed Giannis. Now they're in a position where it's time to win big. They gave up a monster trade package to get him. They got Bam. There's literally nothing to develop. It's literally time to roll the balls out and go see if it's going to work or not. Granted, there is some question marks still with this team. A lot of people, myself included, feel like Bam would probably thrive better if he played more on the wing rather than playing the 5. However, Giannis is going to be taking that spot. So now Bam is going to have to stay in that same role. And I think Bam is obviously really good in that role. And this is probably the best front court we've seen since Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins back with the Pelicans. It's time for this team to step up. Both of these guys have been to the finals within the last 5 years. Giannis even won one. Bam's been to 2. It's quite literally championship or bust for this team. Anything short of making a finals, you question whether or not you made the right move and trying to go all in on winning now. Which, honestly, I don't think any team has gone all in the way the 76ers did. They basically told the Miami Heat to hold my beer, went and traded for Jaylen Brown, and then brought in LeBron James to create, honestly, what could be viewed as somewhat of a super team, at least one of the closest things we've seen to it in almost the last decade. There is literally no excuse for this team not to be great. LeBron might be old, but he is still very valuable, especially in the role he's going to play. And yes, Embiid does have the health issues, but guess what? The NBA decided to bless him with the least amount of back-to-backs and the least amount of games where they'll play 3 games in 4 nights. Now, I'm not saying that's a cure-all, but that should definitely be able to help them out. And then when you add it to the fact of the star power that this team has and the scoring ability, they'll be able to rotate who's getting rest so that they'll be able to plan ahead and be healthy come playoff time. Anything short of the finals would honestly be upsetting with the star power and the capability that this team has. This is literally a put up or shut up year from them. I would honestly expect Embiid to be out of there if they don't win a championship this year, or at a bare minimum make the finals. But for the sake of Cleveland, they better hope that Philly thing does not go well, because if they do not make the finals after going an entire offseason of doing nothing, after absolute embarrassment, we just watch you get handed BT in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. This team is done. There is absolutely no way that this team is coming back. It is finals or bust for this team. And not just like a 1 or 2 move trade. I mean that they are completely starting over. They almost have no choice. James Harden is aging. Donovan Mitchell has been linked to the Knicks and linked to getting out of Cleveland pretty much since he got there. And if you're not going to, and unfortunately, you're located in Northeast Ohio, so most players don't really want to be there unless they're in a winning situation. You have to be able to prove to the superstars that you are regularly going to be able to put talented players around them that they can win with. Otherwise, you're just recycling the same issues that you had in LeBron James's career. The Cavs have to learn from their previous mistakes, or once again, they're going to lose everything and be back on the same level as like the Wizards or the Brooklyn Nets.